Hello everyone, it is Jazz here. It is time for my June reading wrap-up. I read 2 comic book collections, 1 normal book, and a heck a ton of manga because I did the Manga Readathon, so there's a ton of stuff to review, and let's just jump into the fun. I finally got around to reading SpiderVerse, and this is a graphic novel that collects all the comics that had to do with the multi-universe crossover event that they did with all the Spider-Men. I had previous to this read the Edge of Spider-Verse comics, which preluded this, but I hadn't gotten around to this one, and I thought it was time for that. The idea behind Spider-Verse is that there is this family of sort of vampire-like creatures, I guess. They are basically killing all the Spider-Men in all the different universes, or women, because there are also several Spider-Women, and thus all these spider people have to get together and fight this evil force. This is one of those stories where I liked it, but conversely, I did have a few issues with it. But in general, I think this is a really fun collection of comics. The concept is, of course, really cool. It's really cool to see all the different spider people interact with each other. It's very funny because spider people tend to be humorous, and even when they're not, they're more of the straight man to the humor, so it's pretty fun to see just that general interaction. It was really cool to see some of the female spider people and see what they were about, because honestly I haven't read much about them except some of Spider-Gwen, so it was fun to see that as well. The villains are pretty interesting, and they are a family, so it was kind of interesting to see that weird villainous family dynamic and what went on with that. Like I said though, I did have some issues with this, and the first one actually is not to do with the particular plot of this. It's to do with the actual collection and how they ordered everything in it itself. The way they put the comics in order in this is very, very wonky. You read up to a certain point, and then in the middle, you kind of reach the end of the full story, and then they still have comics afterwards that kind of go backwards. I don't know if this is making any sense, but it probably doesn't, because it didn't make any sense to me while I was reading. Basically, you're reading the end in the middle of this book. What I would have done if I was putting this collection together is I would have had the end happen at the very end of it and had everything else that they put in the past the middle point in the front of the story, in front of the actual end of the story, and that would have probably been more of a cohesive book. If you're actually reading this in physical copy, this probably wouldn't be as much of a big deal, because you can actually just skip to the comic that you need to skip to, because it will tell you in the comic what to read next. You know, easily you can just flip to that page and it'll be super easy and find it. But I was reading it in a digital copy, and it's possible to do that, but it's really difficult to do that. If you end up reading this digitally like me, just know that everything is in a wonky order, and it's super, super annoying, because while you could kind of try to figure out how to get to the correct comic that you need to get to, it's a pain. So I didn't want to do that, so I ended up reading it in the wonky order it was in. In terms of storyline though, my only 2 issues were it is way too long. It is something like 648 pages. The length probably wouldn't matter so much if everything was propelling in it, but there are a few moments in here and there that do not propel. They are very filler-ishy, and while they're still kind of fun because they're like partner-ups with certain characters in the Marvel universe, they don't have to do with the plot overall, and so I think that stuff could have been maybe cut out. Also, there are a lot of spider people in a lot of similar ensembles, and thus it took me a really long time to be able to differentiate, particularly the Spider-Men, from each other. A lot of the Spider-Women kind of wear different outfits and they're easy to spot, but some of the Spider-Men, I was like, so which one is this one? By the middle though, I will say that I had figured it out, but I'm just saying it was kind of like crave for a second there. Despite Despite these little issues, I still ended up really enjoying myself reading this, and I decided to give this 4 stars because I'm not going to blame the plot for the bad organization of the actual comics. And now we enter Mangaville. Next up, we're going to talk about the Ultimate Editions of Fruits Basket Volumes 1 and 2. Both of these collect, I believe, 2 volumes of this manga, so I basically ended up reading volumes 1 through 4. Fruits Basket is about this orphan girl, I believe you pronounce her name Taharu, and she has nowhere to stay for the time being, so she is taken in by a mysterious family who has a curse put upon them, and they have to keep that curse a secret, and she discovers what that secret is, and, you know, manga cuteness and insanity and occasional, like, weirdness ensues. It's very fun though. I've wanted to read Fruits Basket for a really long time, mostly because it is super popular, so you hear about it a lot. I am so glad that I picked up this series. It is so flipping adorable, but it has like some like depth to it. It's adorableness with like depth. Like there's really some interesting character development even in these first 4 volumes, and because there's really interesting character development, that means the interactions with these characters tends to be really fun. I also like that even though the main character discovers the secret that this family has up front, she also discovers that there's like secrets under the secrets, and I think it's gonna be really fun when I continue with this series to find out the more underlying secrets that I didn't get in these first 4 volumes, but I'm anxious to know more. So I found both of these to be the bomb, and I've been assured by a friend of mine that they just get better and better, so I'm definitely gonna try to get more of Fruits Basket and read it because I think I found a new awesome manga to read. Next, let's talk about Blade of the Immortal. So I reread the first omnibus of this series, and then I ended up continuing on finally with the second one and reading this one for the first time. The premise of this is that there is a young girl and her family is killed, and she basically enlists this immortal assassin to help her get revenge, and it's a samurai revenge thriller kind of thing. I'm really glad, first of all, that I reread this first omnibus. There were a ton of things that I missed. I also missed that this had a glossary in it for some of the more samurai terms, if you will, and that was kind of helpful in, you know, further understanding some elements. But also, I think this time I was just better able to study the art. I believe in my previous review of this, I said that like some of the art panels were really hard to understand, and I don't know what I was reading or what I was doing then, but all the things that I thought were confusing before were not confusing at all. I don't know. I guess I wasn't really paying attention. Upon rereading, I still, though, further enjoyed the unlikely friendship that is going on with this girl and the immortal assassin. Also, the fighting and violence was kind of fun. Sometimes you're just in the mood for samurai violence, and, you know, it's got that. Now, for volume 2, I thought this one was particularly interesting because I feel like this one explores a lot of the feelings that one would have if they were on a quest for revenge. The main character, she kind of discovers that questing for revenge has some drawbacks, and it's not that she thought it was going to be fun, but I think she didn't think that, you know, when you're going for that, that there are some really interesting consequences to that action, and she basically kind of explores her feelings about that and whether she wants to continue on her quest for revenge. And I thought that was a particularly interesting element of this because I don't think a lot of things that are like revenge quests do explore those feelings. And also some crazy stuff went down, y'all. I thought the first one was a page turner, but this one was even more of a page turner. Like, I could not wait to know what was going to happen. Basically, I just love this series more and more. So I gave both of these 5 stars. Next manga I'm going to talk about is a sort of English originated manga, and it is Amazing Agent Luna Volume 1. The premise of this is that the character, Agent Luna, is a genetically sort of produced super agent, and she's supposed to be investigating sort of cases, but one of her cases leads to her actually having to go to high school for the first time, and she's trying to navigate high school and navigate being sort of a secret agent spy type, and it's going kind of awry, but maybe in a good way. This one is more cute than anything. Like, it's definitely just a super cute, fun time. I really enjoyed seeing Luna just like freak out about high school because it blew her mind. She was just like, what? I have to interact with humans and people and what? I also think it's really funny that her kind of handlers or agent handlers are posing as her parents, and they tend to argue about how to handle Luna's situation, and that just is a really fun interaction to read. The friendships that Luna ends up kind of accidentally falling into are also really fun because they remind me weirdly of, you know, early Buffy the Vampire Slayer, just kind of the way they interact and the way she's trying to like keep this secret, or should I tell them certain elements of things. I'm kind of intrigued to read more of this maybe and to see how those friendships develop and what happens with that. To me, this manga is meant to have a fairly light tone, so I would say the secret agent element of this is more like kids cartoon than like deep secret agent stuff. I need to know what happens with the secret agent plot. And for me, I think that is where I was like, I get that's part of the tone of this, or at least in this first one, but I probably, in comparison with some of the other mangas that I'd read previously in the Manga Readathon, was comparing it to this, and I guess I wanted like just a little more depth in that element of the plot. I ended up giving this one 4 stars because it is wacky fun. I would read more of it, but I do think I want more of like depth with the secret agent element of the story. The next one makes me laugh because I read it literally for the Manga Readathon challenge of reading something outside of your comfort zone, and I thought, what is outside of my comfort zone? Because I read a lot of genres and read pretty widely, and I don't really have a serious comfort zone. And then I thought, you know, like romance stories, like those true romance stories, those do sort of make me uncomfortable. And it has always amazed me that Harlequin romance has manga. So I thought, I need to read me a Harlequin romance manga for this challenge. So I kind of played it safe because I couldn't do like the full-on like things that looked like bodice ripper sort of romances, and so I found this one called Heavenly Angels. I believe this manga is a mangaization of a actual book. This is sort of a Christmas story where at Christmas time this angel comes down from heaven, if you will, and she helps this man with caring for his 3 children, which have been left with him because his ex-wife has had an accident, and his ex-wife actually has divorced him and like married his friend, and so there's awkwardness there, and he's also just like a hurt kind of, you know, grumpy soul, so taking care of kids is tough on him, and so this angel is helping him out. And I was like, yeah, this is a good safe choice because it sounds a little bit like a cheesy Christmas movie, and I don't mind a cheesy Christmas movie. I thought this is a safe bet that I will at least get a kick out of this. And I will say, I was correct. This thing reads exactly like a cheesy Christmas movie. It's got a little bit more of a soap opera kind of dialogue in places, and it also had like one full-on like Harlequin moment for a couple pages, if you get what I'm saying there. But it was like all in good fun. Like, it was kind of like, I can laugh at the semi-cheesiness of this dialogue and just the general plot and the predictableness of it, just because I knew it was coming, and it's a fast 90-something page read. And, you know, the kids in this, the little drawings of the kids, they are super adorable. Like, it was worth it just for the adorable pictures of the children that I saw drawn in this manga, because, aw. I mean, I felt like as an analytical reader, I had to dock some stars for the predictability, the cheesy dialogue, and the Harley Quinn-esque moment, because, you know, they were there. But at the same time, they didn't, like, bother me, because I was, like, getting such a giggle and, like, a fun laugh out of it, and I did enjoy myself while reading it. So I would give this the rating that I would give any cheesy Christmas movie, which is a nice, solid 3 stars. It's okay, read. I just had a good giggle with it. Then let's talk about volumes 1 and 2 of Vampire Game by Joodle. This was a manga that I decided to reread because I do kind of want to get the rest of the series. I think I've read up to 7. I thought I would just start rereading these and eventually get the rest of the series after 7 years, so I can finally finish this after several years. The premise of this is that long ago, in a land far away, King Philos fought with this vampire named Doozle, and it didn't end well for Doozle, and he decided that he was going to come back in some incarnation and get rid of the reincarnation of the King Philos. Flash forward several years later, Lady Ishtar, who is the princess and descendant of King Philos, finds the version of Doozle who actually ends up inhabiting the body of this little cat. And it ends up being kind of funny because Lady Ishtar basically decides that she's going to help Doozle find the descendant that's the reincarnation of Philos. So I always have fun rereading these when I get a chance, even though I haven't finished this series yet, because I don't know, I just love Lady Ishtar. She's just such a kick in the head. She just has this really kind heart, but she's also really super crazy, and even Doozle, or the reincarnated cat Doozle, is like, wow, what have I gotten myself into, because this girl is cray-cray. And I just love that character, and I love the interactions she has, but I also do pretty much enjoy the plot. It's a really interesting kind of vampire story. It's not like the same-o. Yet again, it's one of those mangas where there's like mysteries under the mysteries, and this is why I need to finish this at some point, all the 15 volumes, because there's a mystery under, I think, the already mysteriousness that I've read, and I want to know the answers to all the mysteries. I have always really loved them and gotten into the stories that I've read of them, so I gave these 5 stars. One more manga to talk about before we jump into some other stuff, and that manga is Princess Jellyfish. I read the omnibus, which collects volumes 1 and 2. This is about a young woman who is very fascinated with jellyfish. She really associates jellyfish with her mother who died, and so she's got a obsession with jellyfish, and she ends up living with this group of girls. It's a girl-only kind of complex, and they are all kind of nerds for something. They are all obsessed with something, and they're just a little fun and nerdy and adorably awkward and all that stuff. And one day she meets by chance this really fashionable woman who helps her save this jellyfish from a pet store. And wackiness ensues because apparently appearances can be deceiving, and there's more to this fashionable woman than was originally presented, and I will leave it at that. I decided to try this manga out because I heard other people talk about it during the Manga Readathon, but also I had watched the anime version of this previously, like a couple of years ago, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I was so sad that there were not more episodes of it when I watched it through streaming, because I was just really enjoying the true adorableness. It's very funny in tone. It's got a lot of interesting characters. It's really oddly relatable to you if you're sort of a nerdy girl that's easily obsessed with stuff, which is me. So you will definitely find a character that you see some of yourself in if you're that type of person. I'd be like, yeah, I'm kind of like that. So, but I was like, I think even if you're not a girl, like, we all have our thing that we, like, nerd out about, and you will definitely relate to that aspect of these characters. I also like that it's kind of a story where they're trying to save their building from, like, corporateness, and I really want to know how that turns out because I didn't get to find out when I watched the anime. So I'm hoping if I start reading the manga that I can figure out if they, like, saved their building, because the corporateness is going to tear it down, and I want to know if they save it. It's just a very funny, fun, adorably awkward sort of story, and I massively enjoyed it. I think I might have enjoyed reading the manga more than I enjoyed watching the anime, and that is saying something because I really did enjoy the anime, so I gave this one 5 stars as well. On to the one non-manga or comic that I read, which was a reread of Seeing Red by Frank Bador, which is the second book in the Looking Glass Wars trilogy. Obviously, because it's the second book, I can't say a heck of a ton about the summary of it, but the general series is a retelling of Alice in Wonderland with some fantastical and occasional steampunk kind of taste buds in there. I buddy read this with my friend over at the channel Max Washington Songs. I will link you to his channel below. We buddy read the first book, and now we continued and buddy read the second book, and I'm so glad that he is equally enjoying it. I really massively enjoyed rereading this one because I had forgotten everything. I think I'd read the first book twice, but I hadn't read this one twice, so it had been so many years since I'd read it that it was almost like a new book. Like, I didn't know what was going to happen, and that actually made it a lot more exciting because I was like, oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Because I've forgotten everything. Kind of good that I've reread it because I recommend this series all the time. This one is particularly interesting because I feel like this story does not focus as much on Alice. It focuses a lot on Hatter, Madigan, or the Mad Hatter, and his storyline and what's going on with his backstory. And then also this focuses a lot on the main villains in this story and developing their character, and I thought that was super cool. And I think these are really cool villains in the story. It's one of the main reasons why I really love this series, because the villains are likable. They're kind of like humorous and funny and stuff, but also super, super evil and not good, but you're like, I kind of like you even though you're evil, and your minions are super fun. There's also a lot more in this about the development of the different cultures in Wonderland, as well as the politics of Wonderland, which I found really interesting on a second reread. I also like that Alice and Dodge, who are kind of like the main couple in this book, they have a really great communication. Like, they have moments where they want to keep secrets from each other, but if they find out, they don't like hate on each other, or they try to like discuss it through instead of just like not talking to each other and letting weird stuff build up between them. And I kind of like that about them. It's very refreshing because, you know, in a lot of YA, that doesn't always happen, and it's just kind of refreshing that they have like some, you know, maturity about their relationship, even though they are people too, and they kind of like will make mistakes. So overall, really enjoyed this second reread, really enjoyed buddy reading it, and it was actually one of the few books that I felt like reading in my massive manga comic book zone that it was in June. So yes, 5 stars. Finally, we get to the last read for the month of June, and we went back to comic book zone, and I ended up rereading Spider-Gwen Volume 0 Most Wanted with a question mark, and this collects, I believe, issues 1 through 5 of the Spider-Gwen comic. So the premise of this is that Gwen Stacy was bitten by the radioactive spider instead of Peter Parker in an alternate Earth, and just like the craziness that happened because of it. Now, I've been wanting to really jump in more to Spider-Gwen, even though I'd read this before. I didn't read anything past it, just because I wanted to read Spider-Verse before jumping into more of this, because I could tell there were certain elements that I might, you know, understand more, I guess, if I'd read Spider-Verse, which is true. You can, however, just read Spider-Gwen if you just want to read Spider-Gwen. You can, but I do think if you read Spider-Verse, there's certain things about the character and certain, you know, things that happen in this one that are a little bit more fun. So I did have extra fun because I had, you know, read Spider-Verse before this time. And also I had extra fun because somehow I missed the first read through, because the theme of this is that I missed everything and I forgot everything. That's the theme of this wrap up in terms of rereads. And I somehow the first time missed a lot of the characters in here that were other Marvel characters and just different incarnations of those Marvel characters. For example, there is a lot to do in this one with characters that you would associate with Daredevil and things like that, that I just didn't, I guess, notice the first time, or I don't remember noticing them. And it really does add an extra layer to this, noticing that stuff. But I think the thing that I noticed the first time and the second time that I might have gotten really carried away with the first time, and maybe that was the only thing that I noticed, was the really cool, interesting relationship with Gwen and her father, and what's going on when you're like a vigilante, but your dad's a police officer, and like the insanity that sort of happens there. Of course, I just flipping love Gwen Stacy's Spider-Gwen-ness, because she's like kick butt, and she's also a musician because she plays drums in her band, and I just think that is just like flipping awesome. And of course she has like a really great sense of humor, and I really enjoy that, and her as a character is just bomb. I also really love the art and the coloring in particular of Spider-Gwen. It's got this really neon kind of cool feel. I think it's a nice thing to have in it just because it really shows that it's an alternate Earth, for one, but also I think it really suits the character and the way she views the world, and it works really well, of course, with her costume. I massively enjoyed Spider-Gwen Volume 0 Most Wanted, and I'm anxious to read the rest of it now that I have like a little bit more of insight, and I've read this one, and I think it's going to be even cooler to read all the ones after this that I can read. So super excited about this. Of course, I gave this 5 stars because, I don't know, Gwen Stacy is Spider-Woman / Spider-Gwen is bomb. That was my super huge, probably going to be super long June wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing all my thoughts on all of these things, and that is it for today, my fabulous peeps. I will see you all soon. Bye!